Now that Mr. Geis is here, we'll start the meeting. Good morning. Welcome to the first Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of 2018. We've got a very short menu, and we've got two commissioners who are out, probably with the plague that's infecting the whole country. I'm not going to, I'll introduce everybody here. We have Bill Sim over here, and George Sheets to my right, Terry Marshall to my left. I'm Ken Mabarak, and we have a new gentleman on our commission. First meeting he's been here, Jared Nanke. Jared, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I come from a family of builders and architects. I'm the third generation owner of the design build firm Nanke Signature Group and studied construction management at Columbia University.
That's great. You live in Prescott, family?
Yes. Not married, but I have a fiance. So
That's wonderful. Good. Well, welcome aboard.
thank you.
We'll try to make it painless for you today. Who's going to be emceeing us today? Catherine?
Miss Katie Peters.
Katie. You want to go by Katie? You go by Katie?
Yes, Katie's fine.
All right, let's get right into it. We don't have minutes today. Darla's finishing those up, so we don't have any minutes to approve. And we only have one item and one conversation on our agenda today. So Katie, if you just shove us off, we can launch this thing.
Okay. It was brought to my attention that the description on the agenda wasn't quite accurate, so this more accurately explains. Again, I'm Katie Peterson with Community Development Department, the community planner. This proposed project, SI 17-005, Lincoln Home Site Plan for, it's actually a 6-unit housing project. So it's essentially like 6 detached houses on a multifamily zoned lot, 2 lots. The zoning on both lots is multifamily medium. APN numbers 113-08-109 and 113-08-110. The address 578 Lincoln Avenue. Property owner, Vibrant Building Solutions. So what we're looking at today is the site plan, proposed site plan for site plan review and a recommendation for approval. Just a minute. How do I decrease the size? Let me see if I can get the sizing right.
You want to zoom down?
Yes. There we go. Thank you.
So, what's the line?
Okay. So this is the site here. The surrounding zoning is multifamily medium and business general to the west. The general location is it's east of Miller Valley Road, south of West Hillside Avenue. Right now, the project is on 2 lots. Those will be combined through a separate process before building permits would be issued to create one 24,829 square foot lot. This site is zoned multifamily medium. Once it's one site, it allows for manufactured homes, permits a density of up to 10 multifamily residential units. So the approval of the administrative land split or combination application would be required prior to the building permits. And this proposed site plan includes a total of 6 detached 2-bedroom units. There's an existing house on the site, so that's the more zoomed out view. If you look closer up, there's an existing house here. As you can see, it's 2 lots. Those will be one combined lot. And the proposal is for adding 5 more 2-bedroom units, detached. Those are already built houses that are located at other sites. They'll be relocated to this lot. So those single unit structures, it would be 4 buildings, it would be 965 square feet each with 77 square foot porches, and one that would be 1,027 square foot building with a 60 square foot porch. And those are all proposed two-bedroom. Let me pull up their proposed site plan so you can get a better idea. So this shows the existing residence.
You can zoom way out.
So as you can see, there's, the existing house is here. It's a phased project, so the first phase would be adding, I believe it's these 3 structures, and then these 2 would be at a future time. So again, these would be moved from another location. They're already built. As background, the water service agreement, WSA 17-026 was approved by the Water Issues Committee. It's active but has not been approved by council yet, so that would be at a later time. Per the Water Management and Calendar Year 2017 Alternative Water Allocation Policy, as it's been amended, the applicant has submitted the site plan and water service agreement applications. So at this time, they've turned in the applications for both of these. The existing residential structure, which will remain, will continue to be recognized for current grandfathered groundwater supplies. The adjacent parcel is also recognized for committed groundwater supplies, leaving 0.3 acres per feet year of 2017 alternative water required for the project completion. And then I'll just go over the site plan review criteria by code. No.
This one twice. There we go.
Just looking at the circulation proposed and parking, there's some existing parking for the existing structure, and then there would be proposed 2 parking spaces per unit on the site. Site access, there's a driveway from home through to Lincoln that would provide access to each of the units. There's existing landscaping and mature trees and rock formations on the site, so they've worked to preserve that existing landscaping and the rock formations. So just going over quickly the review criteria by code. Here we've just included all of the relevant criteria to this project. According to the site plan review criteria, looking at building lot and setback requirements with the lot combination that's proposed of the 2 lots, the buildings, as they're shown on the site plan, do meet the required setbacks, 20 feet per front yard and rear yard, 7 feet on the sides. Part of the reason they've combined the lots is to provide more space on the lot. The internal circulation and public-private emergency access, as I mentioned, the proposed driveway that does meet code requirement of 20 feet in width and provides access through the site for all existing and proposed dwelling units. Landscaping, screening, and buffering. This project was designed, the lot layout was designed to preserve existing trees, landscaping, and rock formations. The landscape plan would be required at the time of the building permit application submittal. And outdoor lighting, we would require details of any outdoor lighting at the time of building permit application submittal as well. Looking at the parking and maneuvering areas required by code, this project includes 2 parking spaces per dwelling with a total of 12 parking spaces. We deem that the proposed parking is adequate. While the proposed project is multifamily is in use, which would normally require guest parking of half a space per unit, it does have the character and parking demand of single family. So for that reason, we, looking at the parking suggested, we consider that to meet the single family character requirements and as far as the parking use that would be likely. Public road or street access with proposed street grades. The site access is proposed on Lincoln Avenue. The driveway runs through the site. All other site design criteria do appear to meet the land development code requirements. A maintenance agreement for stormwater quality and would be required as part of the permitting, and the site plan would be reviewed for all grading, drainage, and utility requirements in greater detail when they submit for the permit applications. So I know there was some confusion about from the way it was worded on the agenda. So just to make it clear, it's essentially one existing house and adding 5 more 2-bedroom houses. So a total of 12 bedrooms, but 6 units by the time the project would be complete. And if this application is for the site plan approval, so we're looking at both the existing proposed and proposed future units.
Okay, thank you, Katie. And I was the one that was confused on the number of units, just to clarify that. For some reason, I read that the first time as 12 units on the property. And I thought,
Yeah,
wow,
on the agenda, it is worded that way.
it is.
Yes.
Then I feel
So that
better.
was-
All right, let me back up a little bit. I forgot to, because he's in his summer shirt, and here, coldest day of the year. Councilman Lamerson is here today. Thank you, Councilman Lamerson. You fooled me. I thought it was a flashback.
You know, there's always somewhere else in the planet.
I know, and some of us would like to be there right about now. Tom Menser is not here today. He's down with the flu or something. He's got some, as a lot of people have, with this terrible, whatever it is that's going around. It's really knocking people down left and right. He's in the hospital right now with some lung issues, I think, because of this. So just send your thoughts out to Tom. But let me ask a couple of questions here just to roll us off, and then I'll turn it over to the other commissioners for their thoughts. These houses that you're putting on here are from other locations fairly nearby?
My name is Vince Fornara, and I've been a real estate developer in Prescott for a long time.
Just before the turn of the century.
Yeah. But what I did mostly land development, as you probably know, Ken.
Sure.
But kind of ran out of product and stuff and started getting involved in moving and doing remodels and so on with Garrett Denny. His father, Gary Denny, has been moving houses for years here in Prescott. And so I find it fascinating the way it takes place, and I enjoy doing it. In years past, I did a lot of fourplex type units in and around Prescott, and the thing that's always kind of been an issue is your turnover. And you're an apartment owner, so you kind of know how it is. It's more of a short-term deal. So this really interested me in getting into this, because the idea is to try and create as permanent as a tenant as you can get. And so we started moving houses, and to answer your question, most of them do come locally. We've moved a couple over in Cottonwood and relocated those and remodeled them. One of them we moved about 6 miles, I think. Big house, about 1,600 square feet. It was a former Neil Klein home, and moved it in by the high school by Mingus Mountain High. And here in Prescott, we had a schoolhouse. You've probably seen those auxiliary buildings that the school has. They're just about a 30 by 30-foot building. We moved one of those over to the corner of Campbell and Hillside, and it was roughly 900 square feet, just a big metal box, and we turned it into a 2-bedroom house. And so we have some other structures. One is in Skull Valley that we would be moving up on this site. We have 3 school buildings that came off of Del Rio School, 2 of which would go on this site that would be slated for what Katie mentioned, those initial houses that we know we have. But we've run into a continual problem of finding lots, and as you guys know, between along Miller Valley and around the high school area, that place is slowly transforming into a remodel, and housing is getting nicer as time goes by, and it's obvious because of its location that there's a need for infill, affordable type housing. We currently recently moved a house from Cortez Street over to the corner of Ruth Street and Merritt, and we're just nearing completion. I think we moved it about 3.5 months ago, and put it on a lot, and we're not even done, and we already have somebody that, people that are wanting to move into it. So there is a need for infill type housing in town, and this serves a purpose. The side benefit is it keeps them out of the landfill. So that's kind of what the endeavor is, and it's just so hard to find an infill type lot. It happens that these lots in and around that area are multi-zoned. So this particular site had an existing, somewhat deteriorating residence that we're in the process. We've remodeled the inside. We put a tenant back into it. And when it's all said and done, the exterior of these homes will look like brand new homes. And so I think there's a benefit to having a detached scenario instead of a 2-level compacted type living quarter right in town. And so that's kind of what we're proposing here, is to be able to provide as single-family presentation and nature of dwelling unit, but on a multifamily lot. So I think the confusion might have come from the zoning, that it was probably zoned for 10 to 12 units, and we're looking at cutting that density in half and creating this more residential type.
Thank you.
thing.
Thank you very much, Vince. I asked that because I think, while it's really not technically a part of Planning Commission, I think the process of recycling, but also providing more affordable housing for people in the city is whatever style, is really very important. Do you have a sense, Mr. Fenara, what the rent rates might be in that area?
It varies. Roughly $1,000 is right in that $1,000 range is what we have seen based on what we've moved. The schoolhouse that we moved over to the corner of Campbell and Hillside rents for $1,000. We moved 2 houses where the Maverick is through the stoplight, and just one lot off of the corner of Whipple and Ruth Street, and those initially rented, again, before they were even completed, for $850 to $925, and I think that's right in that range about what they are.
Thank you. So I think it's I think the concept's a great concept for the community in that it provides alternate housing. It's also infill, which we haven't had, and keeps people in the central core, which is great for traffic and other communications. I don't have a lot of questions on this. A comment I might want to make is, obviously, since you don't have all these homes yet, these footprints are just kind of an estimate.
That's correct.
So that we can't really rely that these footprints will be exactly what's going to be there. Your parking looks great to me. I love the fact you got this cut-through driveway, that L-shaped, J-shaped, whatever you want to call it, running through the property. That really gives you it gives you a big advantage, because now you don't have a fire department telling you we got to turn our truck around. So I think the layout is really great. Now that I know for sure it's 6 units, it's even better. I like it. I do have to admit to you, one of my other issues, but when I looked at it, and I looked at this obviously very quickly at first. I saw on your coverage analysis thing, I read these square footages as, like the first one I read as 10,415 square feet. And the S looked like a 5 to me at first. And I just kept reading these. And oh my God, how are they going to get 60,000 feet on this little lot? No, 5 stories, they can't go. So, it just shows you got to go through this stuff slower and take a look, just not be reactionary. So, I don't have a lot of other comments. I'd love to hear comments from our other commissioners. Bill, do you have any thoughts on this one?
No, it looks like a great plan, and I'm a big supporter of infilling, and this looks like a good use of this property, and it's well laid out.
Thank you. George, got any comments?
I guess, yeah, I think it's a great project. I'm fine with the way it is. I guess I have questions more like in terms of what could have the options been, in terms of, you could split the parcels and you could have duplexes where you shared a parcel, or you could, I don't know if we can actually split to where we had 6 individual lots and in common area, do a pad there, and then he could sell them as townhomes, or it would be attached single-family homes. You could have done that if you wanted to, but you chose to stay in the apartment business, and so normally apartments do share the same lot, as I understand. I don't know what that equates to regarding, like, the number of impact fees, the waste and the water connections, where you have 6 units like this, if now you're going to have one for each one, and all that, but I know you're going to have to address all that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Over the years, and I've proposed to George, and back when Julie Penzola was here, the thought of taking what these lots are zoned for in a multi-4-unit project and proposing to revamp the zoning and take those fourplex lots that are generally 50 by 150 foot, 7,500 square feet, split them in half and let them be a fee simple ownership. And what the owner of that lot would give up would be 4 dwelling units in the form of an apartment complex, create a postage stamp sized lot that would allow ownership. But to be able to get that, you'd have to give up as the owner, you'd say, I want to put 2 single family homes that I could build and sell, and I'm willing to give up 2 units for the sake of giving home ownership. We're not proposing that here because that hasn't been addressed or been looked at, but I've always thought that some of these fourplex lots, for the teacher, the single person, the adult that wants to have ownership, if you took one of those lots, split it in half, terminated the fourplex zoning, made it a 2-unit thing, and allowed home ownership, it would allow young families and so on to be able to get a starter home and actually own it and not be subject to having to move out but that's a different issue. But in addressing your question, this is all going to remain as one parcel. And as Katie mentioned, it's 2 lots now. They will be joined. We already have legal description to join them. The idea would be to take the one water service that is substandard on Lincoln Street, upsizing it and running yard lines to each of the homes like you would on any site, and the same with the sewer. Do a crow's foot out to each one of them and have one ownership with one water service and one sewer service to those. But that would all be part of our engineering design, and then our building permit approvals.
So your rental rate would include tenants would not have to pay water. You'd be paying the water?
That's correct, because it's one water meter, unless we went to a private metered thing, which I have no interest in doing.
Appreciate it. Terry, you got any thoughts?
Well, he answered most of my questions, being on the site. I do have a question about, and maybe it'll come up later on, about the drainage off of the site, because it does slope to the south.
Right. Yes, it does, right into the house below it and the apartment building one over from it.
That was my concern when I
Yeah.
looked at it. Now, assuming the drive now is gravel, that will all be paved, I assume?
We hadn't planned on it unless it's a requirement, otherwise it would be gravelled. In response to the drainage thing, we have to have the drainage study done. But it's our intention to take and bring up the area that is south of our circular driveway, to bring it up so that the water coming from above would come out and go towards Lincoln Street. I've had a cursory discussion with Steve Arose when we first got into this to go out and look at it, and he made no commitment. You know, it's obviously subject to drainage design.
He works for the city. He's not going to make a
Yeah,
commitment.
but the idea is to make sure that the water doesn't drain to the south of it by bringing up that elevation. Any of the water that's running in that driveway would turn and bench and go out along the Lincoln right-of-way.
I got a question for Katie and or George. Is there any code requirement that that drive be paved?
No, I don't think so. That would be according to Public Works and Fire Department. So we went through the pre-application conference process with Vince. So he's basing his design currently on feedback he received at that time. And when he's ready to submit for the permit, then engineering would take a closer look and work with him to make sure it's up to code and meeting all requirements.
Most of our requirements are for all-weather surface, which doesn't have to be asphalt or concrete. There are a number of ways to approach that. And sometimes less asphalt and concrete is better for situations like the drainage you're talking about. So we're open to alternative designs other than asphalt.
I had another question. Are any of these manufactured homes, or are they all stick-built on foundations?
They're all stick-built. The three schoolhouses, just like the one that came from Hinman Street over there that the school district owned, was just up on block and pier. But the house in Skull Valley is on a foundation, and we basically have the steel to lift them up and the machinery to lift them up in the air. They're all stick-built structures, and they will all be stick-built structures. And it's basically, we were just very fortunate to find one site that would allow us to get ahead of the game. We've been scrambling around to try and find property in town where we can put them, and it's just so hard to find. But this, we have 3 designated for their site-built structures, and then they have engineering to collaborate with what is existing, and anything that we might have to do to upgrade that is done in the remodeling process. But full-blown foundations are put in before the homes come in, and then we back them over and set them down on those block foundations. And so I'm happy if anybody wants to see what we've done. Katie has some addresses of a couple of them, or you can call me, and I'd be happy to walk you through a house that's been moved and been sat down, and you can see just how it's done, but it's all block and beam.
I did look at the one on Campbell and
Merritt, or Campbell and Hillside, the school structure, Yeah. Yeah. But this had a side street with, like Ken mentioned, fire access. We don't have any that. There's a fire hydrant out at the corner of Home Street right there. So it just was a good fit for what we do.
how about landscaping? Is that going to come later, or do you have plans? Katie, what's the code on that?
We'll require a landscape plan at the time that he submits for the building permit, so we'll take a closer look at that. There are existing mature trees, which he's shown on this site plan, and some rock formations, and some existing landscaping. So he's worked at preserving what's there, which is what the code
Yeah, and
Buyers and will look at-
absolutely, the commitment is there and will be to landscape them, to rent them and make them available and conventional. They'll all be landscaped, similar to what you saw over at the corner of Hillside and Campbell. Ruth Street and Merritt is a mess right now because we're just not done, but in about 10 days, 2 weeks, they'll be landscaped and finished.
Great questions, too. Jared, no expectation here, but if you do have some thoughts or questions, please feel free.
No, I think when you hear lot combination, multiple homes, there's some obvious concerns that come up. But once I had the opportunity to look at the proposed plan, all of my concerns immediately were, taken care of. And I think it's a very well thought out and very smart way of handling this. So good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gosh, I think it's such a great thing. I don't know what is involved in moving a house onto a property from a city perspective. I'm sure there's probably a lot of nighttime work, because I don't think I've ever seen a house being moved in here. One time I saw a house. But from the city perspective, do we still charge fees like we would on a new home, impact, any of these things different for when you move a home on? I'm sorry, Katie, I didn't.
We do charge fees. It is usually less expensive to relocate a house because a lot of the fees we charge are based on the construction cost of the house. If you've already got an existing structure, you're only paying the cost of the remodel, so the fees are lower. As Mr. Fenara mentioned, recycling the older houses that are still usable is a high priority for us, so we encourage him. When he does this, we try to go out of our way to help. Sometimes, I'm from the government and I'm here to help isn't always the best thing, but a lot of times we've waived certain requirements to make it work, or we've assisted them with administrative adjustments to make things work. For instance, the parking in this case. They're going to look and feel like single-family homes, so we park them like single-family homes, save them quite a bit of use of space for additional parking that's not necessary.
Terry has a question for
I
you.
have one more question. Sorry I didn't bring it up before, but the location of the sanitation, does that meet code right off of they don't have to be on site?
The lines are going to get extended into the property so that each of the buildings will have a separate service lateral that will go out to the main, which is in Lincoln Avenue. So it's pretty much like you would have with any single-family home.
You're talking about
The dumpster location? Those are actually pre-existing, I think. There's one across the street that's in the right-of-way of Lincoln, and then there's the one that's proposed on this side. We've done that before as well. We have quite a number of them that are located in alleys throughout the town. So that's not an unusual circumstances, and yes, I think we can work with them to make that happen.
Where would a visitor park if they visited one of the units that already had two vehicles in front of it?
Home Street is short, I'm going to call it I'm sorry.
We'll pick up on the recording.
Home Street is a short, somewhat dead-end street. There is a couple of residences back there. There's a church to the north of us. There's a church to the east of us across Lincoln Street. And so I'm not sure how to answer that question other than
On the street.
parking along the street or along the side street of Home Street. And there may be some non-designated type spots where it's convenient for somebody to park if there was a party or something like that. But I guess it would have to happen along Home Street. Regarding the dumpsters or the sanitation, there is an existing one at the church, and for purposes of accommodating the city's dumpster, it's real easy for them to pull up, load it, and not have to back up. They could swing through and back out onto Lincoln Street. And then I just want to say one more thing in terms of something I think you brought up, Ken, regarding the fees and so on. We've had really good service and really good cooperation from the Prescott Fire Department or the Prescott Police Department for the nighttime, because it is a nighttime thing. And all the utility companies, and we do pay, there's some expense, of course, in having them lift the lines and so on. But We put it out there. Before we move it, we have to get a permit, put it out there, and the response is always really good. And we pay the policemen a little extra money for doing that on their off time and so on. So it worked out real good, and we've had really good help from that.
Great. Thank you, Vince. Golly, I don't see a lot of complication here. I really want to reiterate that I think that infill, especially in the Dexter neighborhood, is really a great thing. It provides housing for a lot of people who may not be buying a home. And hopefully the rents would stay affordable to accommodate all the workers that need places. I go through Dexter a lot to cut through, and then I get lost. I keep coming out to Whipple. I don't know how in the heck I do that, but I keep ending up back out there. But in going through there, I see most of the homes are occupied. I see cars and things at most of the homes. So it's not like it's an empty neighborhood. And I just think it's great that we're recycling, that we're infilling the neighborhood, and you're bringing homes down here that perhaps will be much more affordable than somebody had to do a stick-built home. And so that's my public comment on that. And I hope we can get maybe our courier to write some articles about infill and that type of thing and affordable housing here, because we have so many comments about North Prescott and the growth out there and the subdivisions and whatnot. But this is a very important thing for the community to stay occupied. Empty homes causes a lot of blight. I grew up in Detroit, and we had a lot of empty homes, and we all know what's happened in that area. So with that said, if there's no other comments, I think we're ready to call for a vote or a motion.
I'll make a motion, or you make it?
I'll make the motion to approve agenda item SI 17-005.
We have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. I guess that's unanimous, if there's only 5 of us here. So with that, that pretty much covers the project. Good luck with your project, gentlemen. And keep up the good work. I've seen you out there doing all that stuff on Ruth and Whipple and you know, we have two members of our commission aren't here today, Joe Gardner and Tom Menser. And one of the things we had on the agenda was a discussion in reference to the Deep Well Ranch Master Plan that we narrowly approved with a lot of conditions. Council discussed it, I think, 4 or 5 times. But I'm going to ask George if you wouldn't mind giving us, I want to have Tom and Joe Gardner here of a report, but I think it's great, especially with the community watching, perhaps to give us a Cliff Notes version of what's what.
Sure, not a problem. One of the things that I think is important for everybody to remember is just how much public participation and input went into this. This group, the Planning Commission, held 6 regular meetings to discuss the project. Council held 3 regular meetings to discuss the project and 2 executive sessions to discuss the development agreement, which is a contract. That's an enormous amount. The last time we did anything that took that much public meeting effort was the adoption of the general plan in 2015. It obviously was an important and complex process. I think another thing that's important for people to understand is that after all of the effort that Planning Commission put in, and although it was a divided vote, it was still a positive vote in favor of the project with that list of conditions, and I believe you ended up with 21 listed conditions, that by the time it went through the 3 council meetings and ended up at the last one for the vote, that of your 21 items listed, all but one of them were either incorporated into the plan, incorporated into the development agreement, with one left as a condition on the application that actually was voted on by council. The one item that wasn't included that came out of your initial request was an automatic 100-foot buffer along Pioneer Parkway at the back of what could be the commercial shopping center. And in lieu of that, the developers offered, staff looked at it, and council agreed that any development that occurs within 150 feet of Pioneer Parkway, along that same area where your 100-foot buffer would have gone, that any site plans associated with development in there automatically will come to you for a review and recommendation. So you'll get to look at them and make recommendations on appropriate buffers, depending on what the development is. There was sort of an assumption because the developers' representatives kept using locations in the Phoenix area where major shopping centers, major malls are located. We're not so sure that's what's going to develop there. They use them as examples, and I think their examples are what led you to put that 100-foot buffer condition recommendation in your list. There are numerous types of development that wouldn't require that 100-foot buffer, that other buffers may be more appropriate. So with that in mind, the City Council approved the rezoning, approved the ASAP amendment, and approved the master plan, all as required by our codes, including that 150-foot requirement. So anything that develops within that range will be back to you for site plan review and approval, which is appropriate, allowing you to put specific conditions depending on what, rather than a generic condition assuming they're going to build what they think and what we don't think they're going to build. One of the other things that was a key through the whole process was to look at the potential impacts on surrounding already existing developments in the city. We have Pinion Oak subdivision to the south, several subdivisions across the street that two of you live in, and an already existing subdivision that was incorporated in that was already at least halfway through, if not all the way through, the engineering and design work to create. That's Antelope Crossings, which is still in process of getting all of its infrastructure in place. They absorbed all of those into the impacts. They looked at how it would impact those various things. Traffic, of course, is always something that we're worried about, and traffic can affect the adjacent and nearby subdivisions. They will be required and are required by both the development agreement and the master plan to provide traffic impact studies for any proposed new developments. So when they come to us with a shopping center or a grocery store or a gas station or whatever is their first project after Antelope, they're going to provide us with traffic impact analysis for that project and look at nearby intersections and how those developments will impact those nearby intersections. It's actually standard process for us to do that with development. So if you're going to build something, we're going to want your traffic engineer to look at nearby intersections, because the impacts don't just happen in front of the development. They happen at the intersections near the development. Traffic volume increases, light timing has to change, those types of things. So they were required to do that as part of their process. They will have to do the same thing with sewer and water infrastructure. They have to provide detailed plans, detailed studies at the time development will occur. They provided master reviews of all of those things that are big picture 10,000-foot views, not the level of detail we need for the developments to occur. One other aspect of it that came up over and over again was contact for routes for animal migrations to occur. That was specifically addressed, specifically asked, and specifically included in their plan. There are particular wildlife corridors that are shown on their master plan that they will be verified at the time of subdivision plat or site plan approvals, as we would in most other areas. So, quick overview. If you have specific questions or you want to get into any more detail, please let me know.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, as a commission, we requested that projects come back through here as the site plans are developed, et cetera. However, it was never understood that everything would come through here. And so in terms of like in a school or something planned, what wouldn't come through here to where we wouldn't see the site plan or the preliminary plat?
If it's something that was specifically indicated in their master plan as a particular area. They showed us that downtown core area where they would have commercial buildings, potentially with residential above them. If it's something that follows the exact letter of the master plan, it won't have to come back to you unless it's triggered by the other requirement, that 150 feet that I mentioned. If it's something that's even slightly out of that, we'll be bringing it to you for at least a courtesy review, if not an action review. So
It seems like
most things
something
will be
as
back
major
here.
as that downtown thing we would like to look at it, I would assume, because it's got all of those elements in there with the connectivity and the trails and the landscaping and the setbacks and all those that we considered were real questions and issues and related to engineering standards, et cetera. So I think a lot of that we would want to see, even though maybe fits the description of what was in the development agreement. You know, I don't know how we just balance that.
Well, I think it's difficult because they've made an agreement, they have a 50-page development agreement, and I'm sure a lot of those items are in there. But I also think that the community will tell us what's going to happen. I think if they come up with something that is quite different from what was anticipated, even though it's in a zone, I think we're going to have some more discussion about it. My trust is that we're not going to let them just do whatever they need to. They may want to do a lot of things, and they probably will, but I just have a belief that they're not going to be able to run rampant and do whatever they need to there without.
They won't be able, there are a number of protections.
Correct.
Yeah, there are a number of protections in place to stop that from happening. It has to meet the master plan requirements. It has to meet our internal review processes. All of the technical details that we ask of any development still have to be provided. Water, sewer, drainage, traffic impacts, setbacks, landscaping, all of those things. The master plan changed what kind of landscape materials you can use, but it didn't take away the requirement for landscaping. So all of those things still have to be addressed. It's a slightly out of phase with our standard development process, but it's the standard development process. It's just a slightly different set of rules in most cases that accomplish all the same things that our standard rules accomplish. It was their desire to be able to do it slightly differently than our standard code, and that's why the master plan.
The trend to a form-based zoning type thing where there's a little more flexibility in these things, which I was initially opposed to, and I probably still am, but I see some merit in that, how it flows. Sometimes you can end up with a small community within a large community by having that type of thing, which is really great. In reference to the, excuse me, in reference to that setback, I'm very pleased to hear how it worked out. I was struggling, as you may know, I was very concerned about the intersection of 89 and 89A and its presence to our community. Not for the project itself, but how the community would see that project from that intersection. And Tom Menser and I discussed setback distances, and we didn't come up with this brilliant idea that you came up with, but I think it's great because I thought 100 feet was too small. It should have been a couple hundred feet. It would kick it back to us. But I think that particular piece of that subdivision is so prominent in the community that I don't know how you predict it by putting a definitive number. So I like the process that you did. I think it's a real compliment to our commission and the meetings we had and the homework we had and all those nights of reading pages of that stuff, that most of the conditions that we discussed were part of the major discussion for council. So I think we can feel good about having made a contribution on the largest development that this city has ever seen. And I do have to tell you, having come from Phoenix, where some of these master plan communities, Terry, you remember McCormick Ranch in the 70s, and what was that one out there that Mobil Oil did in the Mesa area, Red Mountain? All those things took a couple of years, in many cases, to get past jurisdictional requirements. So what we did here was very short.
This was definitely fast-tracked as far as the timing goes.
And the public has told us that.
the thoroughness was not. You spent an enormous amount of time in those 6 meetings, and in between those 6 meetings, looking at and dealing with all of those issues. So we sped up the process, but did not shortcut any of the detailed review.
Absolutely. And I do have to say, it's boring for everybody who's been here, but the market's going to determine what's going to happen in those things. And they're not, you got to believe that whoever develops, and I think this is going to be developed by several developers over time, But I think they're not going to put up anything that the market's not going to accept. Very, very unlikely. A developer's dream is not very far from current market trends. So,
No. And you don't build something and then hope you can sell it to someone. You have a
just,
buyer before you build it.
Unless it's a baseball field. You cannot build it and hope that they show up for you. So, anyway, any other questions for George or for Tom or Katie?
We can certainly schedule this again when we have a full commission and be able to take any additional questions you may have.
George, I think
on
that's a
it,
grand
so.
idea, especially since the public may be watching this. Those people with insomnia that want to tune in 3 o'clock in the morning, they can watch us discuss city issues. So with that, I think we can adjourn. Any comments? We're adjourned. Thank you.